In the rugged borderlands of West Texas, where wide-open skies meet the winding Rio Grande, a quiet pride once defined the Hope Valley Canine Training Center. Founded on generations of hard work and military tradition, it was a place where loyalty ran deeper than blood, and America's finest dogs were molded into guardians of the frontier. But one fateful night, the notorious Los Guerreros Muertos Cartel rolled up to its gates, convinced they'd found an easy target, nothing more than a handful of handlers and their so-called mutts. They couldn't have been more wrong. What the cartel never expected was that these dusty kennels housed legendary K9s trained to hunt smugglers in 4 states. Dogs like Rex 2, a Belgian Malinois who'd survived 3 combat tours, and Ghost, the silent guardian who once saved an entire Special Forces unit. For Amanda Collins, losing her family's legacy to cartel firebombs wasn't an option. Under her command, both wounded warriors and fearless recruits were about to turn a desperate last stand into an all-out war. What began as an ambush against a remote training center would set off a chain of events reaching far beyond the ranch's barbed wire. By sunrise, the peaceful desert would be scorched with gunfire, and an unstoppable team of handlers and hounds would show a ruthless cartel that underestimating Hope Valley's guardians was the biggest and last mistake they'd ever make. Quick pause before we continue. Welcome to Fabled Frames. Please tell us where you are watching from. Don't forget to subscribe because tomorrow's story is mind-blowing. Amanda Collins stood at the top of a dusty hill overlooking the sprawling Hope Valley K9 Training Center. She could see the carefully maintained obstacle courses, the newly installed medical bay, and the well-organized kennels that housed some of America's finest working dogs. The setting sun painted the West Texas sky with bands of orange and pink, and there was a sense of calm that made the desert look almost serene. It was ironic, she thought, how peaceful everything felt when the threat just across the border was more formidable than ever. Amanda's father, a retired special operations soldier, had always reminded her that the border between Texas and Mexico could turn from quiet to explosive in a blink. The training center was located on a large swath of land near the Rio Grande. Over the years, it had served as a place to prepare dogs for intense work, drug enforcement, search and rescue, border security, and even combat deployments. To many, it seemed an odd choice to build such a facility so close to potential danger. But her father had insisted that proximity to real threats was an advantage. It gave trainers and dogs alike a taste of genuine tension and real-world conditions. From where she stood, Amanda could see several K9 handlers running evening drills. The first to catch her eye was Staff Sergeant Jackson Price, tall and broad-shouldered, leading Rex 2 through a series of jumping hoops and muzzle attack exercises. Rex 2, a sleek Belgian Malinois with pricked ears and a fiercely intelligent gaze, had served 3 combat tours in the Middle East. He moved like he was part machine, every muscle honed by years of training and real-world missions. A few yards away, Ghost, the white German shepherd who had once saved an entire Special Forces unit from an IED ambush, was trotting proudly beside his handler, Corporal Elena Ruiz. Ghost was easily the most striking dog at the facility. His coat was so pale he almost seemed luminescent under the setting sun. Elena was a quiet professional who had formed a deep bond with Ghost during her last deployment. Word around the center was that Ghost recognized an IED's chemical signature from half a mile away and had saved a dozen lives that day. Then came Thunder and Shadow, 2 dark-furred German shepherd siblings known for their unparalleled tracking abilities. They'd been credited with helping locate cartel smugglers across 4 states, often leading to the arrest of top-level criminals. Their handler, Lieutenant Andre Williams, referred to them as the perfect duo. Thunder was the more aggressive, all snarls and raw power, while Shadow was methodical, patient, and dangerously silent. Lastly, there was Diego, a brindle Dutch shepherd with a permanent limp from an injury sustained on his last deployment. Diego had been forced into early retirement, but Amanda believed he still had a lot of fight left. She'd seen him track a fugitive for nearly 10 miles, pressing on despite his wounded leg. The so-called handicap hadn't stopped him from being one of the most loyal and determined dogs on the ranch. Amanda had spent the afternoon repairing one of the obstacle walls damaged by recent heavy rains. She brushed the dust off her jeans and headed back toward the main house, a sprawling single-story structure serving as both home and administrative office. Inside, the hum of the air conditioner was a welcome reprieve from the desert heat. She entered the control room, a small chamber equipped with multiple monitors and security feeds covering the entire property. Nate Dawson, a former Marine-turned-security specialist, sat watching the screens with a furrowed brow. "Everything quiet?" Amanda asked, her eyes darting to the monitors. "Too quiet," Nate said, taking a sip of lukewarm coffee. He was a wiry man in his late 30s, with an intense gaze that had probably saved his life in more than a few firefights. "Cartel's been quiet lately." "I don't like it." Amanda nodded in agreement. The Los Guerreros Muertos Cartel had a history of violent escalations against anyone interfering with their smuggling routes. A canine training center, especially one known to supply dogs to border patrol units and special operations teams, stood out as a prime target. But over the past few weeks, there had been no sightings, no threats, just radio silence. She patted Nate on the shoulder. "Keep an eye on it. I'll be in my office. Let me know if anything changes." On her way down the corridor, she passed the newly framed photos hung on the walls, pictures of heroic dogs and their handlers from various branches of the military. Each frame represented a story of bravery and sacrifice. Amanda paused at a photograph of her father with his retired German shepherd, Samson. Her father had passed away the year before, leaving her the training center. He once told her, "We may be in a remote place, but never forget that evil can find you anywhere." The memory of those words still sent a chill through her. Amanda's office was modest, a sturdy wooden desk, an American flag folded in a triangular frame, a small bookshelf filled with volumes on canine psychology, and a single comfortable chair for visitors. She sat down, switched on her computer, and began reviewing the next week's training schedule. Outside, she could hear the last of the day's drills winding down. The rhythmic barking, the sharp commands from handlers, and the occasional applause when a dog performed exceptionally. It was a familiar symphony that had become her life. She typed up an email to a potential sponsor, praising the facility's accomplishments and ensuring them that the dogs they trained here were second to none. Suddenly, her desk phone rang. It was Nate. "Amanda, got something," he said, sounding tense. "Nothing major yet, but there's a black SUV about 5 miles out, moving slowly along the old desert road. They've stopped twice, like they're scoping something out. You want to check it out?" She pursed her lips. "Yes. Keep eyes on them. If they get any closer, I want a patrol to intercept. We can't afford to take chances." "Roger that," Nate replied, and the line went dead. Sighing, Amanda locked her computer and made her way back down the corridor to the control room. Over the next hour, she and Nate watched as the black SUV inched closer, paused, then reversed direction, eventually disappearing into the desert. No confrontation, no direct threat, but it was enough to stir uneasy feelings in her gut. Amanda felt that this was just the beginning. By the time she stepped outside, the sun had vanished behind the horizon, leaving a canopy of stars overhead. The temperature had started to drop. A soft breeze carried the faint smell of desert sage. She spotted Elena walking Ghost back to his kennel and waved goodnight. Standing there in the vast Texan night, Amanda took one last look over her beloved facility. She saw the silhouettes of dogs resting in their kennels, heard the rustle of the wind through the cacti, and felt a surge of pride for what she had built here. But there was also dread. Her father's warning echoed in her mind, reminding her that danger was only ever a breath away. Inside the main house, the lights were dimmed for the night, and the staff quarters were silent. Amanda made a final check of the security feeds on her phone, brushed her hair back, prepared for what she hoped would be a quiet night's sleep. Unbeknownst to her, the Los Guerreros Muertos Cartel was already mobilizing just beyond the border, readying to strike in numbers far greater than anyone at Hope Valley Canine Training Center had ever faced. The peace that had graced the twilight hours was nothing more than the lull before the storm, and the dogs at Hope Valley were about to face a trial by fire unlike any they had ever experienced. In a dingy warehouse in Ciudad Juarez, just across the border, Hector Elmito Vargas stood at the center of a circle of men. His dark, cold eyes flicked over his subordinates, gauging their readiness and determination. They were members of the Los Guerreros Muertos Cartel, men forged by violence and greed. Tonight, they were making final preparations for an audacious mission. On the surface, the goal was simple: teach a lesson to the meddling Americans who train dogs that patrolled the border. In truth, Vargas had a deeper motive. He had personally lost a lucrative smuggling route due to the keen noses and relentless pursuit of dogs from Hope Valley. That blow to his reputation in the cartel world rankled him more than the financial loss. It became a matter of personal pride to see the place burned to the ground. In the half-light of the warehouse, the men donned black tactical gear. They loaded magazines, checked rifle actions, and tested communication equipment. Vargas himself wore a plain black shirt and cargo pants, a pistol strapped to his thigh. A scar ran across his left cheek, a reminder of a knife fight during his early days in the cartel. He moved around the circle, silently inspecting each man's loadout, occasionally pausing to give a nod of approval or a quick correction. At the far edge of the room, a large board displayed a satellite image of the Hope Valley Canine Training Center. Rough lines indicated perimeter fences, main buildings, kennels, and known vantage points. With a laser pointer, Vargas traced a path from a side road up to the training center's southern boundary. "Here," he said, pointing to a service road on the map, "is where we'll begin. Our contacts say there's minimal traffic at night and the fences are unguarded in this sector. Once we're through, we split into 3 groups. Group A heads to the main building, Group B takes out the kennels, and Group C handles the outbuildings and vehicles." A tall man with a shaved head and a tattoo of a skull on his neck raised a hand. "What about resistance? The place is run by ex-military, right?" Vargas curled his lip. "That's exactly why we have 30 men. We outnumber them. Besides, they train dogs, not an army." A few men chuckled, their confidence fueled by numbers. But Vargas knew better than to underestimate even a small group of well-trained fighters. Still, he trusted the element of surprise and the overwhelming force they were bringing. They loaded into a convoy of trucks and SUVs, crossing into Texas under the cover of night through back roads known only to smugglers. A hush settled over them, anticipation mixing with a sense of invincibility that armed men sometimes carry into battle. Vargas rode in the lead vehicle, eyes scanning the desert beyond the windshield. The moon offered just enough light to outline distant mesas. Silence pressed in around them, broken only by the hum of engines and the occasional radio chatter from the other vehicles in the convoy. After nearly an hour of driving, the lead SUV veered onto an unmarked dirt road. Dust billowed behind them, obscuring the rest of the convoy, but they traveled in tight formation, headlights off, guided by night vision goggles. 5 miles in, Vargas ordered the vehicles to halt. The men dismounted quietly, their boots crunching the gravel. In the distance, faint security lights from Hope Valley glimmered. They spread out into the desert brush, rifles at the ready. A hawk screeched overhead as if warning of the approaching danger. Vargas signaled for radio silence. He raised 2 fingers, then pointed them forward. The men began the slow, methodical approach. Back at the training center, a skeleton crew manned the graveyard shift. Nate Dawson was in the control room, his eyes drifting between the monitors. Amanda, exhausted from the day, had turned in for the night. Only a handful of canine handlers were awake, completing late-night kennel checks. For the rest, dogs and humans alike, it was a time to rest and recharge. There was a flicker on one of the screens, something moving along the southern perimeter. Nate frowned, leaned forward, and tapped the screen. A single camera displayed a grainy image, maybe a coyote or a jackrabbit, but the shape was too large to be wildlife. It disappeared behind a small rise, reappearing a moment later along the fence line. Nate's jaw tightened. He toggled the radio. Amanda, we've got potential movement on the south fence. Could be nothing, but a second flicker of movement caught his eye. Then a third. His heart rate quickened. In her bedroom, Amanda was about to drift off when the call came through. She bolted upright, adrenaline pumping at the urgency in Nate's voice. She grabbed her sidearm and sprinted down the hall to the control room, throwing a quick glance through the windows. In the distance, she could see the faint headlights of vehicles that had come to a stop. The desert was alive with shapes moving against the pale glow of moonlight. Nate met her at the door, eyes wide. Multiple tangos. I can't get a precise count, but at least 20. Possibly more. Amanda glanced at the monitors, her mind racing. We need to wake everyone. Get the dogs ready. Sound the alarm. A loud klaxon blared through the compound, followed by Amanda's voice crackling through loudspeakers. We have a confirmed threat. All hands, prepare defensive positions. Repeat, defensive positions. Canine handlers, secure your dogs. Lights flicked on throughout the training center, transforming the quiet complex into a hive of activity. Handlers rushed to the kennels. Dogs barked in alarm, and the entire facility roared to life in a state of emergency. Outside, Vargas and his men heard the klaxon. The advantage of total surprise was gone, but they still had numbers. Vamonos! Vargas barked, signaling for his men to accelerate the assault. A hail of gunfire erupted at the fence line. Sparks flew as bullets struck the chain-link barrier, and the facility's floodlights illuminated the shadows of the advancing cartel gunmen. Amanda grabbed a rifle from the armory cabinet in the control room, threw a spare to Nate, and began coordinating with the few on-site guards to establish a perimeter. Through the windows, Amanda could see muzzle flashes and the dark silhouettes of armed men. A deep dread clutched her stomach. Nate, do we have enough people here to hold them off? He shook his head. We've only got half our usual security detail. The rest are on leave or running errands in town. Amanda's mind whirled. She thought about calling law enforcement and border patrol, but she knew from experience that help might not arrive in time. The only immediate backup they had were the dogs and a handful of staff. Rushing outside, she found Elena Ruiz crouched near the kennels, trying to calm Ghost. He's ready, but I need to gear him up. The gunshots are making him antsy, Elena said, her knuckles white around Ghost harness. Nearby, Jackson Price had already unleashed Rex 2, who was growling, hackles raised, eyes glowing with anticipation. Rex 2, known for his calm aggression under fire, looked ready to take on an army if needed. Thunder and Shadow were with Lieutenant Andre Williams on the east side of the compound, scouting for any gunman trying to flank them. Diego limped alongside Corporal Hansen, tail low but eyes alert, determined to prove he was still capable of defending the place he called home. A volley of bullets whizzed overhead, ricocheting off metal surfaces. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Amanda recognized the popping sounds of automatic weapons. This was a full-scale assault. The staccato echoes of gunfire overlapped with the barking of dogs, creating a cacophony of impending chaos. Peering around a corner, Amanda saw muzzle flashes light up the fence line. At least 10 cartel members were pouring through a section they had cut open. More footsteps pounded somewhere to the east, another breach. She raised her rifle, took aim, and squeezed off a series of shots, forcing the intruders to dive for cover behind an overturned ATV. Sweat trickled down her brow. She knew this was bigger than any training scenario. This was war. And the only thing standing between the cartel and total devastation were a handful of determined people and a pack of highly trained dogs. Her radio crackled. Amanda, came Nate's voice, they're everywhere. We need to fall back or risk being overrun. She bit her lip, scanning the yard. The staff quarters were in danger, as was the kennel building. They couldn't just abandon the dogs. This was their home. But she had to think strategically. In the distance, a rocket-propelled grenade whooshed past, exploding against a storage shed that went up in flames. The impact knocked Amanda onto her back, ears ringing. She struggled to her feet, heart pounding as she watched the fire spread. "We can't let them burn this place down," she whispered to herself. Yet, the flames were already licking up the sides of the shed and threatening to spread to the main building if not contained. Vargas's men advanced closer. The night sky glowed orange with flickering firelight. Over the din of gunfire and barking, Amanda could hear the triumphant shouts of the cartel. They believed victory was within reach. But they had yet to meet the true defenders of Hope Valley, the dogs whose loyalty and training would be tested this night. As Amanda braced herself behind a concrete barrier, she watched Rex 2 leap forward, fearless, into the fray. It was time to unleash every resource they had. The final stand had begun. Even as the gates buckle and the sheds burn, a deeper blaze of resolve ignites in Amanda and her canine warriors. Will their years of training and unbreakable bonds be enough to turn back 30 heavily armed men? Gunfire lit the night like macabre fireworks. Sparks danced off the corrugated metal walls as bullets ricocheted, and the smell of burning wood and chemicals thickened the air. The storage shed's flames illuminated the compound in a hellish glow, casting wild shadows that darted across the ground. Amanda ducked behind a concrete partition, reloading her rifle with shaking fingers. Every breath felt scorched by the heat rolling off the burning shed. Glancing around, she took stock of the situation. Nate Dawson was crouched behind a toppled tractor not far away, returning suppressive fire toward the cartel fighters crawling through the fence. Jackson Price had positioned himself near an overturned picnic table, guiding Rex 2 as the dog prepared for engagement. Over the radio, the frantic voices of other staff members called out positions of attackers and requested medical assistance for the wounded. Thunder and Shadow, southeast corner, Lieutenant Williams's voice crackled. "They're flanking with at least 5 men. Need backup now." Amanda spotted the silhouettes of the 2 German shepherds bolting across the training yard, their ears pinned back, their bodies low to the ground, as though they were dark phantoms weaving between muzzle flashes. She felt a twist of relief knowing Thunder and Shadow were on the move. Few humans, let alone dogs, could match their mastery of stealth and tracking. A sudden explosion rocked the far side of the compound. Someone in the cartel had tossed a grenade, sending a plume of sand and debris skyward. The concussion wave rippled through Amanda's chest. She fought to remain focused, resisting the instinct to cower in fear. Her radio crackled again, this time with Elena Ruiz's voice. "I'm pinned near the kennel. Ghost is with me, but we have multiple hostiles advancing. We can't." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Amanda's stomach clenched. She had to move to help. She peered over the partition just in time to see a group of 4 cartel gunmen, faces obscured by balaclavas, rushing toward the main building. Each carried an automatic rifle, and one lugged a jerry can sloshing with gasoline. "Oh no, you don't," Amanda muttered under her breath. She steadied her rifle and fired a controlled burst at the group. 2 of them dove for cover, the other 2 returned fire. Amanda ducked, bullets whizzing overhead, chipping concrete fragments that peppered her cheeks. From her right, she heard a fierce bark. Rex 2. The Belgian Malinois bounded into view, with Jackson following close behind, rifle raised. In a fluid motion, Rex 2 charged one of the cartel men who had ducked behind an equipment crate. A scream tore through the night as the dog latched onto the man's forearm, tearing skin and muscle. Jackson used the distraction to take down another assailant with 2 well-placed shots. Across the yard, a second building erupted into flames. The hiss of igniting chemicals sent a pillar of bright fire roaring upward. Amanda's heart sank. The cartel's plan to burn the facility was now painfully evident. They aimed not only to kill, but to destroy everything she and her father had built. She sprinted from her cover to a nearby water hose, jamming her thumb over the nozzle to create a makeshift spray. The pressure was pitiful, and the flames were already too intense. It was a losing battle, but she couldn't just stand by. All the while, bullets streaked through the air around her. A burst of automatic fire ripped the hose from her hands, the metal nozzle clanging against the concrete. Amanda dove behind a row of stacked sandbags, cursing under her breath. Her radio squawked again. "Williams here," came a strained voice. "Thunder is hurt. Took a bullet grazing along the flank. Shadow's holding the line, but we're pinned down." Amanda's thoughts raced. They needed medical supplies, and they needed to regroup. But the onslaught felt unrelenting. The entire perimeter was compromised, and the facility was turning into a war zone. If they didn't find a way to contain the attack, it would all be lost. She clutched her radio. "Everyone, fall back to the central courtyard if you can. We need to consolidate our forces and set up a defensive perimeter around the main building and kennels. Leave the outbuildings if you must." Amid the chaos, Ghost and Elena suddenly appeared near the kennel building. Ghost's white coat was matted with dust and streaks of something dark. Amanda prayed it was just dirt and not blood. Elena, face smeared with soot, waved frantically. "We can't stay in the kennel. It's compromised. Get to the courtyard." Amanda shouted back. Elena nodded, turning to shepherd some of the less experienced handlers toward the main building. Ghost snarled as bullets sparked off metal cages behind them. But the dog held formation, protective instincts on full display. Movement near a collapsed fence caught Amanda's eye, more cartel men flooding in, the muzzle flashes from their rifles spitting fire. One pulled out a lighter and touched it to a rag stuffed into a glass bottle. Improvised Molotov cocktails. He lobbed one into the courtyard, and it smashed near a cluster of crates, igniting them instantly. Searing heat licked at Amanda's face as she crawled towards safety. The courtyard was supposed to be their fallback point, but it was quickly becoming a death trap. She tried to remain calm, remembering her father's words about dealing with chaos. Focus on the immediate threat first. Right now, the immediate threat was the wave of cartel fighters advancing relentlessly. Suddenly, from behind a smoldering tractor, came a gray silhouette, Dago, the wounded Dutch shepherd. His limp was pronounced, but there was fire in his eyes. Corporal Hansen trailed behind him, sweating profusely, fear etched across his features. Diego barked once, guttural and low, as if daring the cartel to test him. In that moment, a wave of bullets hammered the tractor. Amanda flattened herself against the ground. The bullets roared overhead, peppering the courtyard with hot lead. She could feel the vibrations in her bones, the metallic tang of adrenaline flooding her mouth. Just then, she caught a glimpse of Vargas himself, his scarred face revealed by the glow of the flames. He stood near a crumpled section of fence, barking orders into a handheld radio in Spanish. He projected an aura of cold purpose, like a man who viewed this massacre as nothing more than a necessary step to reclaim his reputation. Amanda focused on him through the rifle scope, her finger hovering over the trigger. If she could eliminate their leader, maybe it would cause enough confusion to slow the assault. But Vargas was no amateur. He darted behind cover before she could get a clean shot, disappearing into the swirls of smoke. A series of thunderous barks made Amanda pivot. Thunder and Shadow had rejoined a fight, the male shepherd wincing from an apparent flesh wound on his flank. They attacked a trio of cartel fighters, trying to set another building ablaze. Thunder lunged for a man's arm, teeth flashing in the firelight, while Shadow circled with lethal precision, cutting off any escape route. Shots rang out, and Amanda watched in horror as one of the gunmen fired at Thunder's direction. The dog yelped in pain but did not let go. Fueled by desperation and anger, Amanda scrambled for a better vantage point. She popped off a quick burst of rifle fire at the cartel men attacking Thunder and Shadow. Two went down, their bodies slumping against the burning crates. The third, pinned by the dogs, collapsed in a frantic attempt to fend them off, ultimately failing as Shadow caught him by the leg. For a brief moment, the courtyard quieted, save for the roar of flames and the crackle of burning wood. It was a lull in the fighting, but not an end to it. Smoke stung Amanda's eyes. She coughed, struggling to see how many more attackers remained. Jackson Price emerged from behind a shattered water trough, Rex too, at his side. "We've got maybe 15 down," but more are outside the fence, he reported. We're outnumbered. We need to call for help or retreat. Amanda pressed a hand to her ear, trying to use her radio, but the static was overwhelming. The facility's communications tower must have taken a hit, or the cartel was jamming their signal. She cursed under her breath. We can't retreat. They'll just chase us down. And we can't leave the dogs behind. Jackson nodded, glancing at the cluster of dogs, some limping, some frantic, but all alert to the danger. We stand and fight, then. Before Amanda could answer, a fresh round of gunfire erupted from the western side of the compound. The battered fence gave way, and a new group of cartel fighters surged forward. Their silhouettes loomed through the swirling smoke, rifles raised, flaming Molotovs in hand. Amanda's heart raced. Could they repel another assault? She gripped her weapon tightly, glancing around at the half-destroyed facility, the wounded dogs, and her equally battered colleagues. The hope that had illuminated this place seemed on the brink of extinction. Yet within that same swirling chaos, Amanda felt a surge of unwavering determination. If the cartel wanted a war, then war they would get, fought with tooth, claw, and unbreakable loyalty. With new waves of cartel fighters pouring in and the facility in flames, could Amanda and her canine warriors muster the strength to stand against impossible odds? Bullets whistled past in deadly arcs, pinging off metal beams and sizzling through the desert air. The glow of fire illuminated the swirling clouds of smoke, turning the training center into a nightmarish landscape of orange and black. The sounds of men shouting orders intermingled with canine snarls and desperate calls for backup. Amanda crouched behind a partially collapsed wall, mind racing. The perimeter was lost. The courtyard teetered on the edge of being overrun. Each second saw a fresh bullet pass too close, another building catching fire. The only advantage they had was the dogs, fearless, well-trained, and unwavering. Jackson, Amanda rasped into her radio, hoping her voice carried through the static. Focus on pushing them back from the courtyard. We can't let them reach the main building. Copy, Jackson's voice returned, broken by gunfire in the background. Rex 2 needed no command to attack. In the flickering half-light, the Belgian Malinois leaped over crates and debris, aiming straight for the next target, a cartel gunman rummaging in a duffel bag, presumably for explosives. The man raised his rifle, but Rex 2 clamped down on his wrist before he could fire. Screams blended with the dog's ferocious growling, echoing across the yard. Ghost and Elena had positioned themselves near the kennel exit, where several staff members were helping injured dogs and humans. The white German shepherd stood guard, muscles tensed, head lowered in a menacing stance. The moment a cartel fighter attempted to breach that makeshift sanctuary, Ghost sprang forward with a flash of white fury, teeth glinting like daggers. Elena, pistol in hand, fired controlled shots to keep the attackers pinned down. Meanwhile, Thunder and Shadow continued a coordinated strike on a group of 3 men near the southwestern edge of the courtyard. Despite Thunder's wounded flank, both shepherds moved swiftly, flanking their targets like wolves cornering prey. The men spun in confusion, firing erratically. One bullet grazed Shadow's ear, drawing a sharp yelp of pain, but the dog didn't retreat. The siblings wove in and out of the thick smoke, using the darkness to their advantage. Amid the chaos, Diego limped through debris-strewn pathways like a soldier on a final mission, Corporal Hansen staying close behind with a shotgun. The Dutch shepherd might have been wounded, but his instincts were as sharp as ever. Spotting movement behind a burning tractor, Diego growled and signaled Hansen with a low bark. Hansen recognized the cue and fired 2 blasts into the shadows. A pained cry confirmed the threat was neutralized. Amanda managed to catch her breath for a fleeting second, crouched behind the wall. Sweat dripped down her temples, and her lungs burned from inhaling smoke. She surveyed the scene. The courtyard was ravaged, but they still held it for now. She saw her people fighting with every ounce of resolve they had. The dogs were holding their ground, forcing the cartel attackers to stay spread out, unable to concentrate their assault in one crushing wave. Still, she counted at least a dozen more cartel fighters, some advancing from the sides, others ducking behind smoking wreckage. She gritted her teeth, checking her rifle's ammo. If only they could coordinate a push to reclaim the perimeter. But that seemed impossible with the raging fires and scattered defenders. The radio crackled again. This time, it was Nate Dawson. "Amanda, we got a chance to flank them from the north side if we can get around the burning vehicles." She peeked over the wall and saw the path he was talking about, a narrow gap between two buildings that had yet to catch fire, leading to a brushy area near the northern fence. From there, defenders could loop around and possibly catch the attackers off guard. "Roger that," Amanda answered. "I'll take a team. You keep them busy here." "Copy. Good luck." Nate's voice was grim but resolute. Amanda signaled to Elena and Jackson, who were regrouping near the kennels. Ghost and Rex, too, panted at their heels, eyes sharp. She explained the plan in short, clipped sentences. They glanced at each other, battered but determined, and nodded in unison. Time was of the essence. If they didn't break the cartel's momentum soon, the entire compound would be lost. The small group sprinted through drifting clouds of smoke, hugging the walls to avoid being spotted. Amanda led the way, rifle at the ready. Ghost and Rex, too, ran alongside their handlers, ears perked for any sign of ambush. The air grew hotter as they passed a crumbling outbuilding fully engulfed in flames. The metal siding creaked and groaned under the intense heat, threatening to collapse at any moment. They reached the gap between buildings. Elena peered around a corner, scanning for hostiles. Two cartel gunmen stood guard by a charred pickup truck, their attention focused on the main courtyard. Elena raised her pistol, fired twice, and both men dropped. Ghost growled, but Amanda gestured for silence. They had to remain stealthy for this to work. Once through the gap, they entered a small patch of desert brush near the northern fence. Gunshots and shouts receded slightly, muffled by the crackling of flames behind them. Now came the risky part. They needed to circle around, move parallel to the fence, and come up behind the cartel lines. If they were spotted, they'd be caught in a deadly crossfire. Hunching low, they advanced. The ground was uneven, littered with rocks and mesquite bushes. Every step had to be careful. The dogs, trained to move quietly, padded silently beside them. Amanda prayed that the darkness and smoke would cloak their approach. Halfway along the fence, they paused behind a large boulder. Over the top, Amanda could see the flicker of flashlights and muzzle flashes. Cartel fighters were exchanging gunfire with a few defenders who remained around the courtyard's central vantage point. She spotted Vargas, recognizable by the scar on his cheek, barking orders into a handheld radio. He stood near a group of 4 men, one of whom carried a rocket launcher. Elena leaned in to whisper, "We take out that launcher first. If they fire another rocket, the main building could go up in flames." Amanda nodded, heart pounding. She understood the risk. Once they opened fire, it would be a matter of seconds before the cartel realized they were being flanked. They had to move fast and hit hard. Jackson signaled Rex 2, pointing to a gunman standing slightly apart from Vargas's group. The dog's body stiffened, and a soft growl rumbled in his throat. Ghost crouched low, muscles taut. Amanda steadied her rifle on the boulder, sighting in on the man with the rocket launcher. She inhaled, exhaled, and squeezed the trigger. Her shot found its mark, dropping him instantly. A cry went up among the cartel. They whirled around, but it was too late. Jackson and Elena fired in quick succession, taking down 2 more. Rex 2 and Ghost exploded into motion, charging across the sand like living missiles. Vargas spat a curse and ducked, rolling behind a smoldering piece of wreckage. He lifted his pistol and got off a few blind shots. One of the bullets pinged off the boulder, narrowly missing Amanda's face. She kept her head down, reloading quickly. Rex 2 lunged at a cartel member who was aiming at Elena. The man screamed, toppling under the dog's weight, his rifle clattering to the ground. Rex 2 clamped his jaws around his shoulder, shaking violently until a man went limp. Ghost zeroed in on another gunman attempting to rally. With lethal precision, the shepherd knocked him off balance, teeth flashing across a forearm. Elena finished the job with a single shot. In the confusion, Vargas scrambled back, firing sporadically in an attempt to keep them at bay. Jackson advanced, returning fire. A round grazed Jackson's leg, drawing blood, but he pushed through the pain. Vargas, realizing he was outmatched, radioed a frantic command in Spanish. A battered SUV roared to life nearby. The last 2 cartel fighters in the area laid down suppressive fire. Amanda, Elena, and Jackson ducked behind the boulder, bullets kicking up sand around them. Rex 2 and Ghost took cover behind a burned-out vehicle. A moment later, the SUV sped toward the exit, its tires screeching over scorched earth. In the passenger seat, Vargas leaned out the window, firing wildly. Amanda raised a rifle, lined up her sights on the fleeing vehicle, and squeezed the trigger. The rear windshield exploded in a burst of glass, but the SUV kept going, disappearing into the smoke-laden darkness. Damn, Amanda cursed. Vargas had escaped, and that meant this wasn't over. But immediate threats remained. More flashes of gunfire came from inside the courtyard. They could hear the continued barking of dogs and the shouts of defenders. Amanda and her team pivoted to flank the remaining cartel fighters from behind. In a swift, coordinated assault, they cleared out a small group pinned by Nate Dawson's covering fire. Thunder and Shadow emerged from a swirl of smoke, still injured, but resolute in battle. The sudden flanking maneuver turned the tide. Under assault from both front and rear, the remaining cartel men panicked. Some tried to flee, others fought to the last breath. By the time the final shots echoed into the desert night, the courtyard was a field of chaos, scorched earth, twisted metal, wounded men and dogs alike. Several outbuildings were ablaze, black smoke towering into the starry sky. The moans of the injured mingled with the crackling flames. Amanda surveyed the wreckage, tears burning in her eyes. The once proud Hope Valley K-9 Training Center lay in partial ruin. But they had survived the initial onslaught. For the moment, the gunfire had ceased. Nate appeared, dust caked to his face, clothes torn. We've cleared most of them. Some surrendered, others got away. Vargas left with a handful of his men. Amanda exhaled, feeling the weight of exhaustion press down on her. We need to regroup, treat the wounded, and get these fires under control. Vargas won't stop. He'll regroup too. She reached down to pat Rex 2, who panted heavily at her feet, blood staining his fur, but not his own. Ghost limped over, muzzle splattered with dirt, pressing against Elena's leg for reassurance. Thunder and Shadow collapsed, still alive, but whimpering in pain from their wounds. Diego limped forward, rejoining the group with a short bark as if to say, "We're still here. We're still fighting." Amanda's gaze swept across the battered remains of her facility. The dogs, though tested and battered, had proven their worth far beyond any training scenario. Their loyalty and skill had saved countless lives tonight. Yet the cost was high. They had repelled the first wave. But as the fires raged and the night pressed on, Amanda knew in her heart that Vargas's retreat was only temporary. The war was just getting started. Hope Valley stands, but at what cost? With Vargas still at large, how long before the next wave crashes against their smoldering walls? And can they even rebuild in time? The first rays of dawn revealed the full extent of the devastation. Smoke wafted from the charred rubble of once sturdy outbuildings. Water hoses lay sprawled across the courtyard, partially melted by intense heat. Vehicles were reduced to twisted metal frames, and craters from grenades pockmarked the training fields. The stench of burnt plastic, wood, and flesh lingered in the air. Amanda stood at the edge of the courtyard, her eyes scanning the wreckage. She felt a crushing weight in her chest, a blend of grief and rage. For several agonizing seconds, she couldn't move, couldn't speak. Just listen to the crackle of dying embers, the buzzing of flies already drawn to the carnage, and the groans of the wounded. Around her, the staff worked tirelessly. Jackson Price and a volunteer medic stabilized an injured handler. Nate Dawson supervised a small group collecting weapons from fallen cartel fighters, ensuring none of them were still alive or posed a threat. Lieutenant Williams carried a heavy-duty first aid kit from one wounded dog to another, ignoring his own bruises. The battered, exhausted dogs were being tended to near the kennels, where some veterinarian supplies had escaped the fire. Amanda finally mustered the will to step forward. She moved on instinct, picking her way through debris, pausing to check on staff members as she passed. There was a surreal quiet to the morning, post-battle lull that felt both merciful and eerie. Elena Ruiz approached, limping slightly. Ghost walked beside her, bandaged on his flank. "We lost 6 staff," Elena said softly, voice heavy with sorrow. "Several others are wounded. Some of the dogs are hurt too, but we don't have an exact count yet." Amanda's throat tightened. 6, she repeated, the number echoing painfully in her mind. There were also several cartel bodies scattered around, men who had chosen to fight and kill, and who had been met with deadly resistance. She closed her eyes for a moment, forcing herself to think strategically despite the emotional toll. Vargas and some of his men had escaped, and it was only a matter of time before they regrouped. Perhaps they would return with an even larger force, or maybe they would try a different approach. Amanda wasn't sure, but she knew staying in this gutted facility might be suicide. Nate walked up, wiping sweat and soot from his brow. "We can't defend this place in its current state," he said, reading Amanda's mind. "Most of our perimeter defenses are wrecked, the armory is damaged, and communications are iffy at best." "What about calling for outside help?" asked Elena. "Law enforcement? Border patrol? Military?" Amanda sighed. "I've tried. The line is spotty, but I managed to get a message through to the county sheriff. They're stretched thin dealing with multiple cartel-related incidents across the region. Border Patrol might send a unit, but it could be hours, maybe even a day before they arrive." Nate nodded grimly. "We need to evacuate. At least the wounded and the dogs. We can't treat them properly here, and we sure as hell can't hold off another assault." Amanda's gaze lingered on the remnants of the facility, the place her father had poured his life into. The reality of abandoning it, even temporarily, felt like a punch to the gut. But logic screamed that it was the only option. She cleared her throat, steeling herself. "All right, let's gather everyone. We'll do a tactical withdrawal." In a flurry of tired but urgent activity, they organized a convoy using the few vehicles still operational. The staff loaded crates of medical supplies, food, and water. They even managed to salvage some training records and essential dog gear. Thunder and Shadow were placed in a large SUV with a makeshift veterinary station. Both shepherds needed immediate professional care. Diego rode in the back seat with Corporal Hansen, tail wagging weakly despite his limp. Rex 2 and Ghost, the least injured, paced alongside their handlers, unwilling to be separated from the action. Burned rubble and bullet-riddled walls bore silent testimony to the brutality of the night's battle as they prepared to depart. A hush settled over the courtyard as people and dogs gathered. Some staff members were on crutches, others had arms in slings. Their faces were etched with grief and exhaustion. Amanda climbed into the passenger seat of a truck, carefully placing her rifle within arm's reach. She felt an odd sense of finality, as though she were leaving behind a piece of herself. But staying meant certain doom if Vargas returned in force. She took one last look at the training center, tears stinging her eyes. "Move out," she said over the radio. The convoy rumbled down the dirt road, skirting the remains of fences and scorched earth. Behind them, the rising sun cast long shadows across the devastation. Smoke curled into the sky, a dark signal visible for miles. Each turn in the road revealed more silent stretches of desert, eerily calm, as if the land itself were unaware of the violence it had just witnessed. They traveled for over an hour, snaking through back roads to avoid any potential cartel roadblocks. Eventually, they reached a small defunct gas station near a dried riverbed. It offered some cover and a chance to reassess. They parked the vehicles in a semicircle, forming a temporary camp. "We'll stay here," Amanda announced, "at least until we figure out our next move." They set up a triage area inside the old station's garage bay. The volunteer medic and 2 staff members with combat lifesaver training began tending to the injured. The dogs were placed on blankets, their wounds cleaned and bandaged with the limited supplies they had. Ghost paced anxiously whenever Elena left his side. Thunder lay still, panting in shallow breaths, while Shadow stood over him, protective yet trembling from his own injuries. Rex too sat at Jackson's side, eyes focused on every movement, ready to defend at a moment's notice. Diego let out a soft whine, clearly uncomfortable, but he tried to stay upright, as if refusing to show weakness. Amanda radioed the county sheriff's office again. This time the signal was clearer. She managed to speak to a deputy who promised to send help as soon as possible. But there were no guarantees. The deputy mentioned more cartel violence cropping up in nearby towns. The region was effectively under siege. Resigned to the reality of their isolation, Amanda turned to her staff. "We need a plan. Vargas won't just quit. He's lost men, sure, but he's going to come looking for revenge." Nate stepped forward. "We still have the element of mobility. He expects us to hole up somewhere, but if we keep moving, he'll keep hunting," Jackson interrupted, voice grim. "We need a place to reinforce, or we need to take the fight to him. Otherwise, we'll just be running until he corners us." A silence fell, broken only by the buzzing of a flickering fluorescent light overhead. Amanda's eyes drifted to the dogs. They had risked their lives to protect the training center and its people. She remembered the stories her father used to tell, how sometimes the only way to deal with a brutal adversary was to strike first, with overwhelming force and unyielding courage. She lifted her chin. "We can't take on an entire cartel. But Vargas is operating in this area with a specific group, maybe 50 men total if he calls in all his resources. We took out a big chunk last night. If we hit him where he's vulnerable, maybe we can break his hold." Elena's brows knit. "You mean go on the offensive?" Amanda nodded. "Yes, I know it sounds crazy, but hear me out. He's not going to expect it. He likely thinks we're broken, scattered. The best defense might be an unexpected offense." Jackson let out a low whistle. "We have limited ammo, limited manpower, and injured dogs." "True," Amanda conceded. "But we have something Vargas lacks: loyalty, training, and a moral high ground. Plus, the dogs give us a distinct advantage in stealth operations, infiltration, and detection." Nate rubbed his temples. "We'd have to pick our target carefully. We can't just waltz into his stronghold." Amanda drew a rough map on a piece of scrap paper. "We know they have a safe house south of the border, but Vargas also uses remote desert compounds on our side to store weapons and contraband. If we can locate that stash, we might deal a significant blow and force him to retreat." Elena nodded slowly. "And we also do this to buy time for law enforcement to mobilize." Jackson cracked a half smile, the first glimmer of hope she'd seen all morning. "Then let's do it." They spent the next hour patching people up, reloading what ammunition they could salvage, and giving the dogs a chance to rest. To boost morale, they distributed water and the few protein bars left. Some staff members, shaken by the idea of continuing violence, considered leaving to seek refuge in nearby towns, but most realized they might be safer staying with the group. As the midday sun climbed, the temperature soared. Amanda gathered a smaller strike team, herself, Jackson, Elena, Nate, and a few other experienced handlers. The plan was to slip back into the desert and pick up the cartel's trail. The dogs, especially Thunder and Shadow if they recovered enough, could help track Vargas's vehicles. The rest of the staff and dogs would remain at the gas station, fortifying it as best they could. Thunder was in pain, but the vet patch had helped him enough that he could walk. Shadow refused to leave his brother's side, the connection between the two dogs almost palpable. Ghost seemed energized, as though the thought of hunting down the men who attacked them was fueling his resolve. Rex, too, ever stoic, simply looked ready. Diego dozed fitfully, still recovering from his limp and the stress of battle, so they decided to let him stay behind for now. By early afternoon, Amanda and her strike team rolled out in 2 vehicles. They left behind a skeleton crew to protect the wounded and the remaining dogs. Everyone understood the risk. They were dividing their already small force. But if they succeeded, they might cripple Vargas's operations, or at least force him onto the defensive. Driving over dusty tracks, the desert around them shimmered in the heat. Each mile brought them closer to the front lines of a war they never sought, but now fought by necessity. Tension twisted in Amanda's gut. She worried for the staff they left behind, for the injured dogs. She worried they were stretching themselves too thin, taking on an enemy that had already proven itself ruthless. Yet beneath that fear lay a fierce resolve. She owed it to those who had died, to those who had bled in defense of Hope Valley. And most of all, she owed it to the dogs, Rex 2, Ghost, Thunder, Shadow, Diego, and all the others who had placed their unwavering trust in her. This was their stand. If the cartel wanted to burn everything down, they'd have to face the wrath of the K9S and their handlers one more time. As Amanda's strike team ventures back into the desert on an offensive mission, will they find Vargas before he regroups, or walk into a deadly trap of his own making? The late afternoon sun scorched the desolate landscape as Amanda's 2-vehicle convoy traversed the dusty backroads. The open desert stretched for miles, broken occasionally by rocky outcroppings and tufts of scrub brush. It was the kind of terrain that could hide a small army or a well-stocked cartel safe house. Inside the lead SUV, Amanda rode shotgun, eyes scanning the horizon. Thunder and Shadow lay in the rear, Thunder bandaged around his flank, Shadow's ears still seeping slightly through makeshift gauze. Despite their injuries, both were alert, ears perked. In the trailing pickup, Elena and Jackson oversaw Rex 2 and Ghost, each dog wearing tactical vests with integrated cameras, though there was no guarantee the cameras would remain functional in a firefight. Nate Dawson had a laptop open on his lap, occasionally glancing at a digital map. They had a partial lead from intel shared by a local rancher who'd once reported suspicious activity to the authorities, vehicles coming and going late at night near an abandoned mine. If Vargas was regrouping or storing weapons, it would be in a place like that. "We're about 5 clicks out," Nate said, pointing to a spot on the map. "There's an old mining road up ahead. If we keep going, we might risk being seen on approach." Amanda thought for a moment. "We'll park the vehicles behind that ridge and proceed on foot." She radioed instructions to Elena in the second vehicle. The small convoy pulled off the dirt road, kicking up a cloud of dust. They parked behind a low ridge, hidden from direct view. Dismounting, they checked weapons, water supplies, and the dogs' conditions. The heat was brutal, and both canines and humans were already sweating. "All right," Amanda announced, gathering everyone. "We move quietly, single file. Dogs in front, on short leads. We see or hear anything, we take cover immediately. The moment we confirm the cartel's presence, we radio in and figure out our plan of attack." They set off, the crunch of gravel underfoot blending with the rustle of wind through sparse foliage. Thunder and Shadow sniffed the air, occasionally lowering their muzzles to the ground. Amanda hoped they'd catch a scent of the vehicles or men they'd encountered the night before. Meanwhile, Ghost and Rex 2 walked with controlled tension beside Elena and Jackson, scanning every rock and bush for signs of an ambush. Before long, Shadow tensed, tail rising. He let out a low growl. Thunder followed suit, sniffing around a patch of dried tire tracks. Amanda crouched beside the dogs, examining the ground. Several sets of footprints overlapped with the tread marks, suggesting multiple vehicles and men had passed through recently. That's fresh, Nate murmured, pointing to a still moist patch of motor oil on the dirt. Maybe just a few hours old. Jackson's knuckles whitened around his rifle. They're here. Or close, anyway. They continued along the trail, keeping low, until they spotted a cluster of dilapidated buildings at the base of a rocky hill. A rusted sign reading, "Trace Almas Mine," hung crookedly off a broken post. Beyond, the entrance to the old mine yawned like a dark cave. Around the buildings, they could see a few vehicles, some black SUVs, a couple of dusty trucks. Amanda counted at least 4 armed lookouts, each wearing tactical vests and toting assault rifles. "That's definitely them," Elena whispered, peering through binoculars. She could see additional movement by the mine entrance, 2 more men standing guard. Amanda gestured for everyone to take cover behind a series of boulders overlooking the site. She pulled out her binoculars, scanning for Vargas. After a few moments, she caught sight of a tall figure in a black shirt, scars slashed across his cheek. It was Vargas, standing near a battered SUV, talking intently with another man who carried a notebook and a phone. "He's here," Amanda confirmed. "Looks like they're planning something big." Elena exhaled. Could be an arms shipment, or they might be regrouping to finish what they started. "Either way, we've got to move fast." Nate chimed in, "We can call on the location to the sheriff, but by the time they send anyone, Vargas might slip away again." Jackson surveyed the terrain. "We're outnumbered, but if we strike from the high ground, we might have a chance. They won't expect us to come at them in broad daylight." Amanda glanced at her watch. "We still have a couple hours of daylight left. That gives them plenty of visibility, too. But maybe that's our only choice." They huddled together, formulating a plan of attack. Thunder and Shadow, though injured, would remain on short leads with 2 handlers, providing close security. Rex 2 and Ghost, in better shape, would spearhead the initial breach once the humans engaged with covering fire. The goal was to disable vehicles, neutralize as many cartel fighters as possible, and capture or kill Vargas. Amanda didn't relish the thought of killing, but Vargas had made it clear he was beyond reasoning. With positions assigned, they began the slow crawl down the slope toward the mine buildings, hugging the rocky terrain to stay hidden. The desert sun beat down unmercifully, and sweat trickled down their necks. Every step had to be precise to avoid kicking loose stones that could alert the guards. When they were about 100 yards from the first structure, Amanda motioned for Nate and a handler named Janelle to circle to the left, while Elena and Jackson angled right. She stayed central, heart hammering in her chest. The dogs followed, ears pivoting to every foreign sound. As if choreographed by silent signals, they all took position behind an old bulldozer and some rusted machinery. Through a gap in the twisted metal, Amanda counted 6 cartel guards within immediate view. Vargas was nowhere in sight, likely deeper in the compound or inside one of the shacks. Amanda radioed a final check. "Ready." "Ready," came Elena's hushed reply. "Go," Amanda commanded. Nate tossed a flashbang grenade toward the cluster of guards near the vehicles. A loud pop and bright flash disoriented them, sending them staggering. In that split second of confusion, the dogs surged forward. Ghost barreled into the nearest guard, knocking him off his feet. Rex 2 tackled another, jaws finding a forearm. Amanda, Elena, and Jackson emerged from cover, rifles barking to drop 2 more cartel men who were fumbling for their weapons. Chaos erupted in the dusty yard. Cartel fighters scrambled out of the buildings, some firing wildly at the intruders. Bullets ricocheted off machinery, sending sparks flying. Amanda ducked behind a rusted crane, returned fire, then spotted a guard aiming at Shadow. She fired a quick burst. The cartel fighter crumpled. Shadow barked, pulling at the leash, but his handler held him steady. Thunder growled, stepping forward, muzzle wrinkling in aggression. His bandaged flank bled anew from the exertion, but he seemed determined to protect his handler at any cost. The rest of the compound came alive with gunfire. Smoke and dust engulfed the yard. Amanda's ears rang from the staccato blasts, but she forced herself to remain calm, scanning for Vargas. Nate and Janelle flanked a small outbuilding, exchanging fire with a trio of cartel men pinned behind an SUV. One popped up, only to be met with a well-aimed shot from Janelle, who muttered a silent prayer as she took him down. Another tried to run, only to be tackled by Rex II, who tore into him with single-minded ferocity. Amanda caught movement out of the corner of her eye, a man sprinting toward the mine entrance. She recognized the scarred face instantly. Vargas. She bolted after him, calling for Ghost. Elena nodded and unleashed the white German shepherd, who bounded forward with lethal grace. Vargas disappeared into the darkness of the mine, followed by two bodyguards. Ghost and Amanda reached the entrance seconds later, halting at the threshold. The dank air inside smelled of damp earth and fear. Faint echoes of footsteps retreated deeper into the tunnels. Amanda switched on a flashlight mounted on her rifle, the narrow beam slicing through the pitch black. Ghost trotted at her side, hackles raised. Every nerve in Amanda's body screamed caution. It was easy to get lost or ambushed in a mine shaft. Gunfire continued outside, but it was muffled by layers of rock. She pressed forward, hugging the wall. Each step echoed, and the tension mounted. Ghost sniffed the air, then tugged slightly forward as if he'd caught a scent. A sudden muzzle flash lit the tunnel. Bullets whizzed past Amanda's head, one cracking into the rock beside her, sending shards of stone flying. She dropped to a knee, returning fire. Ghost sprinted ahead, ignoring the barrage, locked on Vargas's scent. The dog vanished around a bend. Ghost, wait. Amanda hissed, terrified he would be ambushed alone. More shots rang out, accompanied by a guttural snarl. Amanda rushed forward, found Ghost grappling with a bodyguard who was on his back, screaming in agony. She raised her rifle and fired, ensuring the threat stayed down. Another swirl of dust obscured her vision, and she scanned frantically for Vargas. A flicker of movement to her left. She pivoted. Vargas stood near a rusty elevator cage, pistol raised. His scarred face twisted in a snarl. He fired. Amanda lunged sideways, pain tearing through her shoulder as a bullet grazed flesh. She stumbled, rifle clattering to the ground. Vargas advanced, eyes glinting with murderous intent. "This ends now," he spat in Spanish, leveling the gun at Amanda's head. She braced for the shot, adrenaline surging. But before Vargas could pull the trigger, Ghost lunged out of the darkness, teeth sinking into Vargas's gun arm. He bellowed in pain, the pistol clattering across the damp floor. Amanda kicked it away and reached for her sidearm. In a split-second decision, she aimed at Vargas's chest. The memory of her fallen colleagues flashed through her mind. Those he had killed, the facility he had destroyed, the dogs he had wounded. Her finger tensed on the trigger. Another shape loomed behind Vargas, one of his remaining bodyguards, a knife raised. Ghost snarled, shifting his attention. Vargas drove an elbow into the dog's flank, forcing him off. Amanda fired twice, striking the bodyguard in the chest. He stumbled backward, knife clattering, eyes wide before he slumped. Vargas, now free from Ghost's grip, lunged for Amanda. His fist connected with her wounded shoulder, sending bolts of agony through her body. She gasped, nearly dropping her pistol. Ghost recovered, teeth snapping at Vargas's leg, forcing him to step back. With a trembling arm, Amanda steadied her pistol and fired once, center mass. Vargas staggered, eyes full of shock and fury. He tried to raise his arms, as if to speak or retaliate, but the strength drained from him. He collapsed to his knees, then fell forward onto the muddy floor of the mine shaft, a final ragged breath escaping his lips. Amanda stood there, chest heaving, blood trickling from her shoulder. Ghost trotted to her side, panting, muzzle speckled with the cartel leader's blood. She didn't feel triumph, only a profound weariness and relief that Vargas could never harm another person or dog again. Her radio crackled. It was Elena. "Amanda? Do you copy? Are you okay?" We've secured the compound outside. Amanda took a shaky breath. Vargas is down, she said hoarsely. We're okay. Ghost is with me. A pause, then relief in Elena's voice. Thank God. Hang tight, we're coming in. Outside, gunfire tapered off. The cartel fighters, leaderless and outmaneuvered, had surrendered or fled. As Elena, Jackson, and the others entered the mine, the final echoes of violence subsided into an eerie calm. Ghost pressed his head against Amanda's side, as if reassuring her. She could barely stand, her shoulder throbbing, but she reached down to pat his fur, whispering a soft, "Good boy." The war might not be completely over. Cartels were hydra-headed beasts. But the immediate threat, the man who had orchestrated the attack on Hope Valley, was gone. Now maybe they could start to rebuild their lives and their training center and ensure that the sacrifice of the fallen had not been in vain. With Vargas dead and the immediate threat neutralized, can Amanda and her fellow defenders truly find peace? Or does a new challenge await them as they return to the ashes of Hope Valley? In the following days, law enforcement arrived at the ruins of Hope Valley K-9 Training Center. They cordoned off the site, gathered evidence, and aided in identifying the bodies of cartel fighters. The local sheriff's deputies, along with a specialized border task force, had also raided several cartel safe houses uncovered by Amanda's team. The once daunting presence of Los Guerreros Muertos in that region was drastically diminished, at least for the time being. Amanda spent most of that time in a medical clinic. The bullet graze on her shoulder required stitches, and she developed an infection from the filth in the mine. Sitting on a stiff cot, she endured 4 drips and listened to the hum of overhead fluorescent lights. Despite her discomfort, her thoughts were with the dogs and her staff. Ghost had stayed by her bedside when allowed, curled up on the floor, refusing to leave. Nurses were initially hesitant about a large German shepherd in a hospital room, but they relented once they heard what he'd done. Every so often, Amanda would reach down and scratch behind Ghost's ears, grateful for his steady presence. 2 days later, she was released with a prescription for painkillers and antibiotics. Elena and Jackson helped her out of the hospital. Rex 2 and Ghost waited outside, tails wagging furiously at the sight of their handlers. Thunder and Shadow were recuperating in a nearby veterinary facility, while Diego remained at the makeshift camp with Corporal Hansen, slowly recovering from his injuries. When Amanda finally returned to the training center, the sight nearly brought her to tears again. Charred debris and gaping holes marked the landscape. Bulldozers and volunteer crews worked tirelessly, clearing rubble, removing twisted metal, and hauling away burnt wood. The main building's roof had partially collapsed. Only the kennel structure remained somewhat intact, though it was riddled with bullet holes. A wave of emotion washed over her. Sorrow for what was lost, gratitude that at least some structures could be saved, and a fierce determination to rebuild. Standing in the courtyard, she closed her eyes, remembering the echo of barking dogs, the laughter of staff, and the hum of daily routines. Elena placed a hand on her shoulder. How do we even begin to fix this? Amanda squared her jaw. One day at a time. We have insurance for what it's worth, but it won't cover everything. We'll need to raise funds, get help from the community, maybe the government. No matter what, we rebuild. Her words were resolute, backed by a fiery will. Even now, some of the dogs roamed the property, sniffing at familiar places turned to ash. Thunder and Shadow arrived a few days later, sporting shaved patches of fur where they'd received stitches. They seemed eager to return to their territory, tails wagging cautiously as they explored the broken grounds. Word of the cartel's defeat spread quickly. Amanda found an outpouring of support from local ranchers, veterans groups, and even national canine organizations. Donations of building materials, dog food, and volunteer labor rolled in. Soon, the once silent training yard was filled with the bustle of reconstruction, the clang of hammers mingling with the bark of dogs. Yet, as they made progress on rebuilding, Amanda felt a niggling doubt. Vargas might have been the local kingpin, but the cartel was bigger than one man. While their operation had been dealt a severe blow, It wasn't inconceivable that another leader might rise to fill the vacuum. For now, though, Hope Valley wasn't under immediate threat. She had time to strengthen her defenses. One afternoon, a black SUV drove up the dusty road toward the center. The staff tensed, memories of that fateful night still raw. But this time, the vehicle bore the official markings of the Border Patrol and a state task force. Amanda stood near the gates, flanked by Ghost and Rex 2, as two agents climbed out. "Miss Collins," said the taller agent, tipping his hat. "I'm Agent Morales. This is Agent Pineda. We just wanted to see the place and thank you personally. You and your dogs saved a lot of lives by taking down Vargas." She nodded politely. "I appreciate that, but we didn't do it alone. And we paid a heavy price." Morales glanced over the blackened skeletons of outbuildings, the fresh graves along the ridge for those who had fallen. "I can see that. We're looking to increase collaboration with local facilities that train K9s for border security. With the cartel activity around here, it's clear we need all the help we can get." A spark of hope ignited in Amanda's chest. "You want to partner with Hope Valley?" Pineda nodded. "Yes, ma'am. We have funding for advanced K9 operations. If you can rebuild and scale your training capabilities, we'd be interested in contracting with you." Amanda felt both relief and determination. This could be the break Hope Valley needed to emerge even stronger. She extended her hand. "Let's talk details." Later that evening, she convened with her core team, Elena, Jackson, Nate, and a few senior handlers. They gathered in what was left of the main building, setting up folding chairs in a half circle. Ghost, Rex 2, Thunder, Shadow, and Diego settled around them, as though they too were part of the discussion. Amanda laid out the news. Border Patrol and the State Task Force want to collaborate. It could be a huge boost in funds, and it would mean more dogs, more training programs, and bigger responsibilities. Elena smiled, though her eyes shone with lingering grief. "Your dad always wanted this place to make a real difference. It seems we're on that path." Jackson leaned forward. "I'm in 100%. We'll need to bolster security, though. Reinforce the perimeter, add better surveillance." Nate nodded in agreement. "We can't be caught off guard like that again." Amanda looked down at Diego, gently scratching behind his ears. The dog's limp was still noticeable, but his eyes gleamed with renewed spirit. She thought about all the dogs, how each one had risked life and limb to protect this place. Their bravery deserved to be honored, and the best way to do that was to keep fighting for the ideals Hope Valley stood for. "All right, then," she said. "Let's do it. We'll rebuild better, stronger, and we'll train a new generation of dogs to protect our borders and keep this country safe." A round of quiet applause moved through the group. Outside, the evening sky glowed with deep purples and oranges, a peaceful contrast to the violence of weeks past. The air felt charged with possibility, as though the devastation had cleared a path for new beginnings. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Volunteers framed new walls, hammered nails, and erected scaffolding around the gutted structures. Local businesses donated supplies, from concrete to kennels. Media outlets ran stories of the heroic dogs that had helped thwart a major cartel incursion. Donations poured in from across the country. Amanda found herself juggling phone calls, coordinating deliveries, and planning the new layout of the facility. She insisted on building a memorial garden at the center of the training yard, a place to honor those, human and canine, who had given their lives. At night, she and a handful of dedicated staff slept in makeshift trailers, keeping vigil under floodlights, rifles at the ready. Little by little, the scars of battle began to fade beneath fresh concrete, newly painted walls, and a sense of renewed hope. Thunder and Shadow, despite their injuries, insisted on joining daily patrols, sniffing around the perimeter as though ensuring no remnants of the cartel lurked nearby. Rex 2 and Ghost quickly adapted to the new environment, their calm presence reassuring the younger dogs brought in for early training. Diego became something of a mascot for perseverance, his limp not stopping him from practicing low-intensity drills. One evening, after a long day of construction, Amanda sat on a newly installed porch swing outside the main house. The sun was dipping below the desert horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of pink and gold. Ghost hopped up onto the porch beside her, head resting on her lap. She stroked his ears, lost in thought. A gentle breeze carried the scent of fresh lumber and the distant chirping of crickets. In the field beyond, silhouettes of volunteers mingled with the outlines of training equipment. It was far from complete, but the transformation was remarkable compared to the smoldering ruins she'd returned to just days before. Amanda whispered softly, as though to herself, "Dad, I wish you could see this." Ghost lifted his head, ears twitching at her voice. She smiled and scratched his chin. "You saved me, Ghost," she murmured, remembering the mineshaft encounter with Vargas. "And together, we'll protect anyone else who needs it." In that moment, she felt a profound sense of unity with the dogs, with her staff, and with a memory of those who had sacrificed everything for Hope Valley. The future was uncertain, the threat of the cartel still loomed on the horizon. But for now, they were rebuilding, not just a facility, but a community of warriors both human and canine, bound by shared purpose and unbreakable loyalty. Rebuilding is underway, but will the newly fortified Hope Valley K-9 Training Center truly stand against the inevitable return of cartel forces, or have the seeds of an even greater conflict been sown? 6 months later, Hope Valley K-9 Training Center was a testament to rebirth. Gone were the charred remains of old structures. In their place rose modern, fortified buildings designed with security in mind. High walls surrounded the compound, topped with advanced surveillance systems. Motion detectors dotted the perimeter, and a state-of-the-art communications tower allowed constant contact with local law enforcement and the Border Patrol. The main building now housed expanded kennels with climate control, a veterinary clinic on site, and training rooms equipped with obstacle courses that could be adapted for everything from urban warfare simulations to drug detection drills. The memorial garden, at the center of it all, featured a bronze statue of a Belgian Malinois standing beside a German shepherd, commemorating the courage of the dogs who had fought that fateful night. Amanda walked the perimeter at dawn, boots crunching over fresh gravel. She took a moment to admire the new facilities, each detail a tribute to the resilience of everyone involved. Inside the fence, staff members were already busy with morning routines, feeding dogs, cleaning kennels, prepping for the day's training sessions. A few Border Patrol vehicles were parked near the entrance, their occupants chatting with staff about the next joint exercise. Rex 2 and Ghost ran free in the courtyard, greeting passing handlers with wagging tails. Thunder and Shadow were back to full strength, their once injured bodies now a testament to the healing power of skilled veterinary care and unwavering determination. Diego, though still limping slightly, served as a beloved mentor to younger dogs, teaching them focus and discipline through patient demonstration. Amanda's phone buzzed. She answered, hearing Elena's voice on the other end. "Hey, we have a visitor at the front gate. Says he's a journalist wanting to do a story on the center. Something about a documentary on canine units." Amanda frowned. "We do get those requests, but get his credentials. We're still a high-risk target. Can't be too careful." "Roger that," Elena said. 10 minutes later, a tall man with a camera slung around his neck entered the compound, escorted by Elena. He wore a friendly smile and introduced himself as Daniel Park, an independent filmmaker producing a documentary for a streaming network. Amanda offered a courteous handshake, though she remained guarded. He seemed genuine enough, complimenting the new facilities and the dedication of the staff. As they walked, he asked insightful questions about the dog's training, the partnership with Border Patrol, and how they overcame the cartel's attack. Amanda answered cautiously, aware that certain details needed to remain classified, but she was willing to highlight the bravery of the people and canines who made Hope Valley what it was today. "Would it be possible to interview you on camera?" Daniel asked, stopping near the memorial garden. Amanda considered it. Part of her wanted to keep a low profile to not attract the wrong kind of attention. Yet raising awareness could help garner more support for canine units everywhere. She nodded slowly. All right, but keep it short. They set up in front of the bronze dog statue, the morning sun casting a soft glow across the courtyard. With the camera rolling, Daniel asked about the significance of the garden, the center's mission, and Amanda's personal journey. She spoke from the heart, recounting the sacrifice of her father, the heroic stand of the K9S, and the unwavering resolve to rebuild. As she shared the story of that terrible night 6 months ago, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride in how far they'd come. The interview concluded, and Daniel thanked her, promising to send a preview once the documentary was near completion. He wandered off with Elena for some B-roll footage, leaving Amanda alone by the statue. Rex too sidled up, nudging her hand. She smiled and gave him a gentle pat. Her phone buzzed again, a text from an unknown number. She opened it, heart pounding as she read, "You may have killed Vargas, but Los Guerreros Muertos still stands. Prepare yourself." A chill ran down her spine. She glanced around, half expecting to see shadows lurking, but everything remained calm in the morning light. She pocketed her phone, forcing herself to breathe. She had known deep down that the cartel wouldn't vanish overnight. Another leader, another faction, someone with a grudge or ambition would inevitably rise. She called a quick meeting with her top staff, Elena, Jackson, Nate, and a few others, inside the new operations center, a sleek room bristling with monitors and communication gear. They gathered around a steel conference table, tension evident in their postures. "I just got this," Amanda said, placing her phone on the table. The text glowed ominously on the screen. Elena's face hardened. "You think it's real, or just someone messing with us?" Jackson crossed his arms. "Could be real. The cartel would want revenge, or at least to assert control. Maybe they've found a new figurehead." Nate nodded. "We shouldn't dismiss it as a hoax. Our improved defenses might deter a full-scale assault, but sabotage, infiltration, targeted attacks, those are all possibilities." Amanda frowned. "Agreed. We stay alert. Review all security protocols. I don't want any staff member or dog caught off guard." The meeting broke. Each staff member left with renewed vigilance. That day's training exercises took on a sharper edge. Handlers moved through mock scenarios with heightened focus, as though expecting real bullets to fly at any moment. The dogs, sensing the tension, were extra keen, responding to commands with a snap of discipline. By late afternoon, the temperature soared, and the border task force arrived to conduct a joint operation drill with the K9 teams. Thunder, Shadow, Rex 2, and Ghost led a demonstration of narcotics detection, bounding across the facility's new agility course. Journalists, alerted by Daniel Park's coverage, showed up outside the gates, hoping for a scoop. Security politely but firmly kept them at a distance. The day eventually wound down without incident. Amanda retreated to her new office, a corner space overlooking the courtyard. She gazed out the window, watching staff and dogs wrap up final tasks. The phone message weighed on her mind, a dark harbinger of storms to come. Elena poked her head in. "You all right?" Amanda forced a small smile. "I will be. We've worked so hard to rebuild." The thought of going through that nightmare again. Elena nodded sympathetically. "I know, but we're stronger now. We have better defenses, more allies, and the dogs are in top form." Just then, an alarm blared, a shrill klaxon echoing across the yard. Amanda shot to her feet, her heart pounding. Through the window, she saw staff scrambling, guns drawn, dogs barking furiously. The siren's wail indicated an intrusion detected along the perimeter. She and Elena dashed outside, rifles slung over their shoulders. Nate's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Possible breach at the southwest fence. All security personnel to stations. Adrenaline surged. Amanda raced toward the southwestern edge of the compound, where a cluster of security cameras pointed at the fencing. As she arrived, she saw 3 staff members aiming rifles at a single figure standing beyond the chain-link barrier. It was Daniel Park, the journalist. He held up his hands in surrender, calling out, "Don't shoot. I just forgot my microphone bag." He stepped forward, gesturing toward a black case lying in the dirt. One of the staff members approached cautiously, verifying it was indeed camera equipment. Amanda's mind reeled. "What the hell are you doing creeping around after hours?" Daniel lowered his hands, sweat gleaming on his forehead. "I'm sorry, truly. I realized after I left my bag. I didn't want to bother you guys again." Nate glared. "You triggered the motion detectors. This is high-security property, remember?" Daniel swallowed hard, eyes flicking nervously between the armed staff and the barking dogs. "I apologize. I'll just go." "No harm intended." Amanda studied him for a long moment. Something felt off, but there was no clear evidence he meant any harm. She signaled for the staff to stand down. "All right. Next time, contact us first." He nodded rapidly, retrieving his bag. An awkward silence stretched between them before he finally retreated toward his car. Amanda watched him drive away, an uneasy feeling gnawing at her gut. That night, as the compound settled into watch rotations, Amanda couldn't sleep. She went over the text message in her mind, the suspicious timing of Daniel's return, and the haunting memory of the cartel's brutality. Staring at the ceiling in her bunk, she worried that the danger was closer than any of them realized. On a late patrol, she took Ghost and Rex 2 around the perimeter. The desert wind was cool, carrying the scent of sage. The moon hung low, casting silver light across the landscape. Both dogs were alert, ears swiveling at every distant sound. Amanda peered through the fence, scanning the inky darkness. "You see anything?" she whispered to Ghost. The shepherd sniffed the air, tail tensing. A coyote howled in the distance. No sign of immediate threat. Amanda forced herself to exhale, glancing back at the glowing windows of the newly rebuilt facility. Her father's dream stood once again, a beacon in the desert. She had to believe they could protect it this time. Yet as she continued her patrol, the night stretching on, she couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the calm before another storm. If and when the cartel or whoever took Vargas's place came knocking again, Hope Valley would be ready. The dogs would stand at her side, just as before, fierce and loyal. But the stakes had never been higher. The story of this place was still being written, and the next chapter might bring a new wave of violence that would test them all.